More than 24 bills that could restrict access to voting in the state. That's what we're hearing about. A limit to early voting hours, stricter ID laws, shorter periods to return mail-in ballots, and limit those who can vote absentee. Lawmakers in several states, in Texas to begin with, but other states as well, are taking strict action. Since the 2020 election, where we saw record voter turnout, the Brennan Center for Justice found that more than 250 election laws have been proposed in 43 different states. Wonder why? Well, some of the most restrictive bills are in Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin. What do those three states have in common? They are crucial swing states. Joining me now to discuss, Jason Johnson, contributor to the GRIO and professor at Morgan State University, Myrna Perez, director of the Brennan Center's Voting Rights and Elections Program, and Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Myrna, what is your reaction to what we're seeing down in Texas, changing the laws to basically make it a whole lot harder for people who don't vote Republican to get out there and cast their ballots?
It is deplorable. What we see are politicians trying to manipulate the rules of the game so that they are able to have job security. And that is not what the country is about. We should have voters choosing their politicians, not the other way around. It is so clear that so many of these attempts are a reaction to changing demographies, to the browning of America, and to the fact that our political landscape is changing.
Jason, the Texas Attorney General's office, I have to share this number, spent 22,000 hours looking for voter fraud. Out of 17 million registered voters, they found 16 cases. So what in the world is the big GOP argument here?
The big GOP argument is we can't win on our actual arguments anymore, so we have to stop black, brown, poor, and young white people from voting. That's literally all this boils down to. At this point, there have been dozens of studies in red states, blue states, and purple states trying to find mysterious voter fraud. No one's found it there. Mind you, these investigations never really, check into voting machines, right? Because we do have evidence that there have been problems with voting machines, but the motivation is purely political at this point. And Stephanie, a key thing that I don't want people to forget about this doesn't just harm likely Democratic voters. This is inconvenient for Republicans, too. There are Republicans in Harris County. There are Republicans in Fulton County, Georgia. It is literally a motivated action by Republicans across the country to have as few people voting as possible, even if it harms their own voters, because ultimately they think it'll harm more Democrats.
Latasha, your group is behind a new effort in Georgia urging big corporations to come out against these bills. Coca-Cola and Home Depot are on board. Why are you doing this? What's this all about?
We believe that corporations have a responsibility. They have a civic responsibility. What we're seeing happen in Georgia, we're seeing this policy, not only is it racist, but it's anti-democratic. And so we know that democracy is good for business. So we're calling forth. We're glad that Coca-Cola and Home Depot are now opposing these bills, but we're also calling forth, where is Delta Airlines? Where's UPS? Where are these other corporations that we spend our money with them? We actually serve as their employees. We work on their boards. The bottom line is they have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to stand with us as we stand with these brands.
Well, get ready, Delta. Latasha is calling you. Myrna, is there another solution here? Because let's be honest, if Republicans control these state legislatures, what can actually be done to stop it?
Well, one, Americans of all political stripes need to say in one very clear voice that voter suppression, racial discrimination have no place in our democracy. We need to continue to do big organizing in the states like Latasha and her groups are doing to make sure that we can make voter suppression as toxic as possible for the political leaders trying to use it. And we need to pass 2 pieces of federal legislation that would put guardrails on what state politicians can do. That would be H.R. 1 or For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which will guard against racial discrimination in voting. Congress needs to step in because there are some politicians manipulating the process for their own gain, and voters are the ones who are losing out because of it.
But are any of those really going to make it through the Senate?
It's funny, all of the folks of us are probably smiling. We have to make them make it, right? It's not going to just happen because we want it to happen. Like, we need big organizing. We need big movements. We need big community clearness that this is what we are expecting to do. Look, the fate of our democracy and whether or not we are going to be robust and participatory and inclusive and speak for all of us is at stake. Are we going to let some politicians who have their self-interested jobs and careers and political parties dominate our politics, or are we going to be a democracy that represents all of us? We all need to get involved in this.
Latasha, big means people outside Georgia, outside Texas need to care about this. What should we realize? We can't let this be a local story.
This cannot be a local story because it's not a local issue. What happens in Georgia will happen throughout. We're seeing copycat all throughout the nation. It will set a precedent. If we allow this to happen in Georgia, we know that the Georgia win, that what happened, that made history, that there was historic Black turnout. And so those voters are being targeted. And so we have to see this as a democracy issue. And I think there's a number of things we can do. Those companies that we're targeting, like Delta Airlines and UPS, that are based in Georgia, they serve the whole nation. These are multinational companies. And so they have places all across, they do business all across the nation. I think putting pressure on them. I think the second thing, as we're talking about the Senate, when we elected President Biden, and we actually gave him the best possible circumstances to govern, we delivered those 2 Senate seats, that we're going to have the Senate to take a strong stand on it. But that means ending the filibuster. They have to end the filibuster. And we also, the third thing is that we have to have H.R. 1, and we have to have the complete restoration of the John Lewis Advancement Act so that we can have stronger protections on the right to vote.
Jason, let me ask you about somebody else who occupies a seat in the Senate, Ron Johnson. We know that last week in a radio interview, he said, and he knew he was going to get flack. He said he didn't feel threatened on January 16th when the Capitol riots took place. He thought they were good, law-abiding people that loved America. He would, however, have been concerned if Donald Trump had lost the election and it was Black Lives Matter protesters storming the Capitol. Now he came out with an op-ed saying the left is trying to silence him and that it's not about race, it's about riots. And let's be clear, I don't know of anyone who's trying to silence him. All I've heard is people say the words he says are absolutely awful.
Yeah, this is the thing, Stephanie. I think this is really important to understand the modern incarnation of the American right. Let me say something racist, and then I'm going to complain when everybody tells me that the racist thing I said is racist. Ron Johnson knew what he said was racist. That's what he said. I'm going to get in a little bit of trouble for this. Trolling is all they do now, whether it's him or Marjorie Taylor Greene or the guy from North Carolina. They don't really want to do legislation. Remember, this is the guy who said that the Affordable Care Act was the greatest assault on freedom he had seen in his life. He's not interested in legislating. He's interested in being a social media star and trolling everybody and everything else like that. I feel sorry for those who have to deal with a member of the Senate who doesn't seem interested in his job. But this is what I think is critical and what's dangerous, Stephanie, going forward. Remember, the guy basically said, when white people break the law, I don't care. That's what he said. He admits the people were storming the Capitol, but because they were white and they liked Trump, he was fine. We already know that Republicans have this bizarre misinterpretation of what happened last year. The protests in 2020 were about unarmed Black people being murdered by police and vigilantes. It didn't have to do with the Democratic Party. It didn't have to do with Joe Biden. It didn't have to do with Senator Harris or now Vice President Harris. So conflating those two things doesn't make sense. But we have to recognize that you still have members of Congress, some Republicans, who've basically said white people committing violence or crimes on behalf of the Republican Party or the conservative movement, I'm fine with that because that aligns with what my belief system is. And that is dangerous for someone who is supposed to be defending our democracy.